Okay. Oh. No, it's another one. What? Wait a sec. I'm going to find the practice test for a sec, and then apparently it's not where I left it. Okay. This should be okay.
Teacher, Romy is also okay. Now she's here again. No, but Romy is also having like Wi-Fi problems. So if you see her, yeah, I just wanted to let you know.
No problem. Is this showing up on your screen, or do you still see just me?
Well, I see a chart.
Do you see this?
Yes.
Now it works.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Okay. Let's begin then. SAT practice test 7. Let's see if we can finish this whole thing in 2 hours. Hope so. We won't go over the passages. I'll just be calling on you to answer the questions, and my understanding will be that you all have already read the passages, so I don't have to like read them all again. We can just refer to the relevant parts to answer the questions if someone has any doubts. Okay. So let's begin with number 1. Which choice best describes a major theme of the passage? And this answer will go to, I'm just going to go in order of the people I see. So Jeremias, you'll go first.
So I took that and I answered D, and it was correct.
Okay. Now, could you explain why?
Because the final paragraph makes clear that, so basically what I took away from this paragraph in a few words was that when he adopted this girl, his life changed. Like, he was cold-hearted before he met this girl.
Yeah.
And afterwards, he kind of started to have accept human feelings again.
Okay.
So
Yeah. It mentions how he was ruled by gold at the beginning, by his need for money, and then Epi came into his life, and suddenly he started noticing new things. Like, here is a good example. As the child's mind was growing into knowledge, his mind was growing into memory. As her life unfolded, his soul was unfolding too. That basically says that as his child was developing and starting to explore the world and learn things, he was sort of remembering his life too, and he was starting to open to the world as well. So yeah, number 1 answer is D.
Teacher, sorry.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you please explain again what is D? Because actually I think is A. If you give me the opportunity to explain why,
Okay. I don't think we have time for like you to explain the entire thing. So, but I understand why you would believe it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's tricky.
So,
I know it's tricky.
yeah, there is a mention of the gold a lot at the beginning, and like how gold is hidden away from the daylight, deaf to the song of birds, started no human tunes, and then the gold had asked that he should sit weaving longer and longer, deafened and blinded more and more to all things except the monotony of his loom and repetition of the web. There definitely is a mention to the corrupting power of a materialistic society, but the first thing that I think is wrong with that answer is that we never talk about society in general. It's just a story about a man. It's more of a narrative theme than a sort of scientific article or like a critique on something. It's more of a story and about a single man.
Yeah.
And also, I would say that the passage, like, there definitely is a moment or moments where we talk about materialistic influences that corrupted this man, but we're talking about the passage as a whole. And I think the passage as a whole has a positive message, even though it talks about negative things, um, especially the conclusion towards the end. We end on a good note. We end on a positive conclusion.
Yeah.
So I would say that the general theme is more positive. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
I actually got that. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Thank you so
Okay.
much. I just will corregir.
Okay. Leah, you'll do number 2. As compared with Silas's gold, Epi is portrayed as having more.
Letter A, vitality,
Mm-hmm.
because the gold is described in the first paragraph as hiding away from the daylight and deaf to the song of birds. And it's not an alive thing.
Yeah.
And Epi is full of joys and that stuff. And that is why I chose vitality.
Yeah. She's portrayed as being full of life, whereas the gold is like unchanging,
Unanimated.
hidden. Yeah, exactly. Good, good. Number 3, which statement best describes a technique the narrator uses to represent Silas's character before he adopted Epi? This one goes to Camila.
Okay. I choose number A. The narrator emphasized Silas' former obsession with Wolf by depicting his goal as requiring certain behaviors of his part.
Yeah.
Because there's a part where he talks about how he pretty much like worship the money, and that's like
Mhm.
the behavior of his part that I saw.
Right.
That you're going. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. The word must sort of implies that gold must be worshipped. Like gold requires of him to be worshipped in close locked solitude. And there's also this. This is the best part, I think, to prove that. The gold had asked that he should sit weaving longer and longer, deaf and blinded, blah, 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 blah. Like it's actually portraying the gold as a person, or it's personifying the gold as if it were actually asking things of him. So yeah, that's totally right. Let's move on to number 4. The narrator uses the phrase making trial of everything in line 7 to present Epi as. This goes to Diego.
I would text him. Maybe, I don't know, his Wi-Fi isn't working.
Diego?
You're muted.
Your microphone's not on.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, I choose here letter B because I don't see any relationships with the other words. First of all, I cannot use negative things like disobedient or even friendly. It doesn't feel very well. Disobedient, first of all, they're listing good things in the line 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
The match at least disobedient. And I was between judgmental and curious, but I choose curious. Literally.
Okay, so I'll explain this a little more. So as Diego said, we're talking here about Epi, and here's the making trial of everything line. All of these are very, very positive things. It's portraying Epi as full of life. So endless claims, ever-growing desires, seeking sunshine, living sounds, living movements, trust in new joy, all that kind of stuff. It's all good. So we can eliminate 2 choices that are clearly negative, disobedient for sure, and judgmental. They're both choices with negative connotations. So we can eliminate those quickly. And between friendly and curious, the phrase making trial of everything in itself, trial means trying. So it's saying that she is trying everything. She's making trial of everything. She's trying all these different things, and that goes more with curious than it does with friendly. So, yeah. curious is the right answer. Thank you, Diego. Number 5, according to the narrator, one consequence of Silas adopting Epi is that he, Sol, this goes to you.
5 is letter D.
Yes.
Looks forward to a different kind of future.
Okay, can you explain a little bit?
Yes, it can be seen in the first paragraph. He says that Epi made him look forward to what would come with the coming years, on lines
Mm-hmm.
from 11 to 16. Yeah.
Okay, yep. Oh, right, and that's the next answer, isn't it? Yeah. So, yep, you're absolutely right. The evidence for this answer is found here. But Epi was an object impacted of changes and hopes that forced his thoughts onward and carried them away from their old eager pacing towards the same blank limit. Carried them away to the new things that would come with the coming years. Yep, exactly right. Okay, so let's just move on to number 7. Number 7, what function does the second paragraph, lines 30 to 52, serve in the passage as a whole? This goes to Romina. 30 to 52, so I'm just going to put those lines there. This. Oh.
I chose C because I thought it did a better work summarizing the paragraph. And the other information that was presented wasn't stated in the text. That's how I felt with that choice.
Okay. Yeah, so we're definitely seeing a sort of real life example of how Silas and Epi interact. And we can see that Silas's life before was this sort of never-ending cycle towards this blank page. Really didn't have any purpose, didn't make a lot of sense. And we can see that this interaction shows a very drastic change from that previous life that he had. But let's address the other options a little bit to see if, because this one can be a little confusing because they're not exactly wrong. I, for example, thought that this could be the one for a second. Yeah. But the key here is that I don't think this is representing a particular moment in time. It is more serving as some sort of example of the effect that is that she had on him, more than establishing a specific clear timeline and saying this is the moment. Because I don't think we ever get any indication. Yeah. This especially, Silas might be seen. It's not assertive. It's not saying he was seen or this happened. It's saying whenever you go out to the field, you might see him because he goes often. He's not just going right now. He's like often going. So this is not the specific time. This is more like a slice taking out of a big cake of things that are happening all the time. Then B, I mean, it definitely does highlight the love he has for her, but I wouldn't exactly say it's depicting sacrifices that he does. I mean, he's enjoying this. He's starting to live life to the fullest. So sacrifices doesn't really apply to this specific instance. And as for this, I mean, there's definitely a significant alteration, but it's more of an alteration within Silas himself more than his relationship to his daughter. Like, it's an alteration in his way of life, but not in their relationship. Does that all make sense? Cool. Okay, number 8. In describing the relationship between Epi and Silas, the narrator draws a connection between Epi's, I'm going to have Catherine answer this one.
So, sorry, teacher, is that me? Like me?
Yes. Yes, there's no other Catherine in the class today. So
Oh,
yeah,
sorry. I just.
no problem.
Okay. I'm actually having lunch now, teacher. So I don't know, but fine will be keen. Or we're on 8. Sorry. I'll say A.
Okay. Why would you say A?
Because like, and in one of those we can see in the text that he starts thinking about his life, and I don't know, that kind of makes me think he is like emotionally fragile, like observing everything that is happening with I don't remember the character's name.
Silas. Silas is the guy, and Epi is the
Yeah,
little girl.
Epi, with Epi. Like, can you hold on? I actually have it all wrote down. I was just having lunch, so I am going to grab my computer.
Yeah.
Sorry for that. I have it here. Don't worry, I'm here already. Oh, it's actually, I actually put B, expanding awareness, and Silas increasing engagement with life. I think it's because like there is a line that says that as Epi grew up, like her mind was unfolding, and Silas was like doing the contrary. Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. It's this. Yeah.
There's like a question that goes
Yeah.
line 43 to 46. Yeah, that one.
Yeah. I'll take over now, Catherine. Yeah. So first, I want to remind you that I said it was fine for you guys to have lunch while we're studying, but could you like have your material with you while you're having lunch? Like, is that okay?
Yeah, sure, teacher. Sorry.
Okay. So, yeah, the reason why physical vulnerability and emotional fragility, I wouldn't say is the right choice, is again because I don't ever think we get a mention of the physical vulnerability of Epi, particularly. We might get some indication of emotional fragility in Silas, but there isn't really a focus on it either. The passage is by and large positive and focusing on growth. So I don't think it ever talks a lot about vulnerability and fragility, which is why A would be wrong. Boundless energy and insatiable desire for wealth. So the key here is that they draw a connection more than a comparison or a contrast. They're drawing a connection between two things that are sort of happening at the same time and with a similar effect. So these two things are very, like, they're quite opposite to each other. So it would be more drawing a contrast or a conflict or a difference or distinction. And then physical growth and painful perception. Again, we never mentioned painful perception that much. It's mostly positive. So yeah, we have a clear evidence of expanding awareness and increasing engagement in especially 53 to 57, which also is the answer to number 9, letter D. So with that said, I'll move on to number 10. And for this, we'll go back to Jeremias because we only have. Oh no, Andres just got into the class, I think. So Andres, it's your turn for number 10.
All right, so I think it's D.
Okay. Let me see. We have a. Is it around here? I forgot the line. 65. Okay. Yeah.
I think it's 52. Oh no.
65 here. Developed a fine capacity for mischief. Okay, so why is it keen?
I believe I like eliminate the others because I think that the others will not fit there. I mean, acceptable, delicate, ornate will not like.
Okay,
Yeah, I think it's that. Just
that's
that.
good enough for me. That's good enough for me. Yeah, so often we could just do this in the test, eliminate the not viable choices and stick with one that we might not exactly know what it means, but we know that it's not the wrong one, so it must be the right one. Yeah, so I'll just go over the meanings of these words to sort of make clear why keen is the right choice. Acceptable is not really what we're going for here, because it doesn't fit the tone of what we're talking about. Epi developed an acceptable capacity for mischief. It's trying to be sort of funny there, quirky, funny. So acceptable isn't really the word we would use. One, for letter B, I don't think one can have a delicate capacity for creating a mess out of things. Mischief is basically what kids have, this quality of creating messes, you know, of like getting themselves in sticky situations and causing trouble. So I wouldn't say that the capacity for causing trouble is really a delicate one. And ornate, letter C, is more of, have you ever heard the word ornamental? Ornaments? So it's like decorations and stuff like that. So an ornate means like richly decorated, I think what ornate means. So it really has no relation to what we're talking about there. Keen, however, means a sort of particularly strong or particularly developed capacity for something. So he has a keen understanding. It's like he has a very clear understanding, a very good understanding. So she has a very highly developed capacity for mischief. It comes to her naturally, is what it's saying. So that's why keen is the right answer. So with that said, do we have any questions about passage 1? Any comments that you would like me to address? Okay. I have one of my own, actually. This passage, it's quite hard. I have to admit that I sort of sped read everything. I tried to solve it pretty quickly, so I might have like gone through reading and writing in like an hour and 20 minutes or something, or less. So when I initially read this thing, I had to read it again because I wasn't sure what the characters were. I made an actual list of like the pronouns. Like I was trying to understand who was who because gold was apparently a person. And congrats to you for actually knowing most of the answers because some of these things were kind of complicated to understand, which is common with literature passages. And yeah, that's my comment. Moving on to passage number 2. This is about automation and job loss, and that kind of thing. Moving on to number 11. The main purpose of the passage is to Jeremias.
I put C. Oh, no. It's different because I have on my computer. It's D. It just says the impact of advancements in technology on overall job growth. Because he mentions how technology impacted and could impact job growth overall. Like how it can take over things that human can do.
Yeah.
That technology in this like era and eras.
Yeah.
Do.
Did you say analyzed? Is that the word you used?
Did I don't remember, but
Okay. Because if you did, that's exactly the right word to use. Because the reason why D is the right answer, these two, we can check the initial verb, the first verb of that statement. And we see that B and C have verbs such as advocate and argue. And these are verbs that have an emotional connotation. They imply that the person has an opinion and is not neutral. They imply that they're talking about how things should be. Remember, did I tell you about positive and normative analysis at some point? Yeah, I told you. In one of my classes, I told you about these concepts that I learned in economics about positive and normative statements. Positive being statements that just talk about a fact, and normative being statements that talk about how things should be. So these two, B and C, they're saying that the passage is arguing or talking about things that should be. Whereas we can see from the tone of the writing, it's pretty neutral and includes graphs. It's talking about things that are. It is either examining or assessing. Those are the right verbs to describe what this passage is doing. So we can immediately eliminate B and C for being options that imply this passage being argumentative, and it's not. We know that it's not argumentative. It's easy to see because we have graphs, and whenever we have graphs, we know that it's probably like the science passage, which is generally analyzing or explaining. It's more, it's not narrative or argumentative. It's like, I'm forgetting the word, like descriptive. Yeah, so, and then between A and D, once we've made that distinction, we see that A focuses more on the workers' lives, and we never really go into the workers' particular life. I mean, we might mention quality of life or like median income, but those are really indicators of job growth or like sort of general indicators of population welfare, but not really of like the workers' lives itself. So the approach is more general, which means we use general indicators such as job growth. Okay, number 12. According to, Brynjolfsson, okay, whatever, and McAfee, advancements in technology since approximately the year 2000 have resulted in, and this one goes to Leah.
Yeah. First, I eliminated B and D because we are talking about the United States. And then I had A and C, and I chose A because we are talking about jobs and not about how skilled the laborers are in the United States.
Yep, that is excellent. Actually, that's perfect reasoning. That's what you should do with these choices. Mostly, there's like 1 or 2 criteria that will help you eliminate choices until you get to the right one, even though you don't exactly understand everything that's being said in it. Like I said before, with the first one, that initial verb already eliminated half of your choices. Here, Leah eliminated half of her choices because we're talking about the US and not the world, which made it much easier because between A and C, only one is actually true. Because we're talking about low job growth. More skilled laborers would mean that is actually the opposite. Well, not the opposite, but it is a positive conclusion in an article that's examining negative impacts of automation and technology.
I need to also pair with the next question. And in the
Yeah,
line,
can you tell me the answer of that next question?
and it's letter A also, because in the last line, it says that impressive advances in computer technology are largely behind the sluggish employment growth of the last 10 to 15 years.
Yep. So yeah, this introduction is basically saying exactly that. These people have argued that impressive advances in computer technology are behind, which means are causing, sluggish employment growth. Sluggish being slow or like not really strong for the last blah, 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 blah. So that means that it's saying exactly what the answer is. Number 14, the primary purpose of the lines 26 to 28 is to, this one goes to Camila again.
Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing. I try to like eliminate all
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the first one is describe a process, which it is not describing any process. It doesn't highlight any dilemma, and also clarify a claim. It isn't neither, because I believe claim is more like an opinion, like you're claiming something. And in the line,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm trying to. In the I just wanna like get it right. I wanna give you my explanation. If it is wrong, then you'll tell me later on.
There you go.
But it says, oh my gosh, okay. In economics, productivity dash the amount of economic value created for a given year, blah, blah, blah. And if one thing I learned about your classes is that we use dash when we want to talk about a term. So that's the reason why I choose B.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, this one was pretty simple if you understood that. I remember giving you an example about coins and saying coins and then dash and explaining what a coin is. So we use dashes to define a term, to sort of make that explanation not a part of the real sentence or the real line of reasoning, let's call it, but still there so that we can define it for people that might not know what it is. Or in the case of productivity, I think people sort of know what it is, but it's a term that people sort of have their own idea of what it means. So in this case, they're defining it scientifically. They're defining what it means in terms of a science that we can measure. So yeah, it is exactly that. Thank you, Camila. Moving on to number 15. This one goes to Diego. As used in line 35, clear most nearly means.
Okay, teacher, I will be sincere. I disappointed you. I'm so sorry. I was not able to do that. I was doing homework in school, but I don't want to make excuses. I take the responsibility, and I apologize to you. I'm sorry. I couldn't have done it.
Okay.
So please don't bother in asking me anymore so that we cannot waste time with me. I don't want to guess or anything. I don't want to make you lose time.
Yeah, I agree. Let's not waste time. So I'll just move to line 35 and see what it's saying and explain it myself. Okay. So the pattern is clear. So yeah, let's see what we have previously and then read what we have after. So for years after the two lines closely tracked each other with increases in jobs corresponding to increases in productivity. So this is talking about a specific graph where we had two indicators. We had productivity and job creation, I think. Yeah. Or total employment, I guess. So these two lines were close to each other and then they suddenly were not close to each other anymore. They were like started separating, diverging. So we're talking about a pattern in a graph. It says the pattern is clear. So if we can see, look at the graph, that we're tracking them and they're all together and then suddenly they start separating from each other and it says the pattern is clear, we have the actual data, we have graphs supporting it, it's unmistakable. You know, we have no way of saying that there isn't a pattern. Camila, did you raise your hand? Please.
Yes, I'm trying to. Okay. What did B meant? I'm trying to search and like translate.
Right.
Again
Keen.
Yeah.
Keen is usually more reserved to
Excitement, like you're keen.
yeah, not exactly. Did you say excitement? It's more like, well, first it's more reserved to people, to be like a personal quality.
Yeah.
And it's usually paired up with a sort of noun such as understanding or capacity. It's like a highly developed something. Keen means highly developed or highly effective. Like we saw before, a keen capacity for mischief. So it's saying she's really good at mischief. She's really good at causing trouble. She has a highly developed or keen capacity for mischief.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to know. I mean, yeah, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, a lot.
Cool. So it isn't really a word that we use to refer to a pattern. Pure, again, it's not a word we use to refer to a pattern. And untroubled, it's also sort of emotional. These three words are actually kind of reserved for people or emotional qualities. But even then, or maybe this is like a chemical substance or something. But anyway, we don't use those words to refer to patterns. And this is the right word. Like it's a pattern that's unmistakable. So yeah, moving on to number 16, we will have Sol, do this one. Which of the following best characterizes Katz's attitude towards today's digital technologies? This one's a hard one.
It's actually letter C, and it's easy to see why. Because in the paragraph, he first brings a counter argument, but at the same time, at the end of the paragraph, he clarifies that he's not sure about what could happen. And in the last line, he uses the expression, if technology disrupts enough, who knows what will happen? He isn't certain about what can happen.
Right, and that's exactly the answer to the next one, right?
Yes, once again.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so you've answered both. Great. And yeah, I agree. I think Katz sort of, I think the key here is making the distinction between technology in general and today's digital technologies, because I got a little tangled up in between those two definitions. Katz characterizes technology as something that has not been proven to relate to long-term job loss. Technology in general, like in the Industrial Revolution or that kind of thing. He talks about the Industrial Revolution, for example. But then when he talks about today's digital technologies, he does say there's something different about them. He says that this might be different because all these new technologies are being developed quite rapidly, and they also encompass a large scope of jobs, of job areas, I guess. They sort of are everywhere. You know, automation is a thing in every single profession. So we don't really know how a change this big could affect job growth. Because like we've seen it before in the Industrial Revolution, but it was sort of reserved to a certain portion of the job force. But this time it's bigger, so we don't really know. That's exactly right. And the evidence is 91 to 92, where he says he's uncertain. Thank you, Saul. Moving on to number 18. As used in line 83, range most nearly means, this one goes to Romina.
I chose A, region, but I wasn't sure. So maybe that's the one, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah. So the right answer is actually scope. But scope, I understand, is a word that many of you might not have a lot of experience with. Scope is usually employed in like more formal terms like scientific articles or sort of studies that impact like a big population or maybe legal language. Anyway, it's kind of a complex word. So in any case, yeah,
Excuse me, I think scope is the la mira of a weapon, isn't it?
right. But we're not talking about exactly that in this.
I'm sorry.
It has more than one meaning. Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. Just in this case, we're using another one of its possible definitions. So,
yeah, I actually searched for the after my time was terminado, I searched for it, and the definition is alcance, which I think is the right word for it. Yeah, I just wanted to let you.
Exactly. Yeah. So all of these refer to distance. However, A, C, and D all refer to physical distance. Mean they refer to position. Position might not be always physical, but it's not really a word that we can use to substitute range ever, probably. The word distance more refers to distance between 2 points, and it's also mostly physical or maybe emotional, but we're not talking about either of those here. We're talking about an abstract range, a range of mental concepts, sort of, if you will. And region does refer to physical land, mostly. So, yep, scope defines a sort of, you can imagine it as a mental circle of things that are inside of it, you know? Like, we're talking about line 83, let's see. 1, 2, 3. Broader range of work. So yeah, we're talking about different jobs and different areas of employment. So just like imagine this mental circle with a lot of different areas in it. We're expanding the scope, expanding el alcance, basically. So yeah. We're number 18. Okay, 19 now. According to figure 1, which of the following years showed the widest gap between percentages of productivity and employment? This one goes to Catherine. Hey. Hi, Gerardo.
Sorry, I'm so late. Do you want the truth or you don't want a beautiful lie?
That's fine. You can just join the class and listen. Okay, Catherine, your turn.
Okay, so now I have my notes, and I just looked at the graph and saw like where was the biggest difference, and obviously it was like in between 2007 and 2017, and it wasn't like it was like in the middle, so I just picked 2013. I discarded the other ones because it goes parallel in those points of the line. Like in 2017, in 2007, it starts like having a bigger gap between it.
Yeah, absolutely. We can see though that between 2007, we have basically one of these lines of distance. So basically 100. And here we have one entire line, but we have this extra and this extra. So we can still clearly see that 2013 has a wider gap than 2007. So yeah, answer is D. Thank you, Catherine. Moving on to number 20, we'll have, I think now it's Andres' turn. So yeah, which statement is supported by figure 2? Andres, your turn.
All right, so I think it's C, because yes, it clearly, like, we can clearly see like that the 3 countries just like increase their output per worker.
Yeah, it's this one's not really hard because it's pretty clear that in 50 years they clearly increase their productivity. That's pretty easy actually. So yeah, that's the correct answer. Thank you, Andres. Moving on to number 21. And now we will have Gerardo answer this one. Which additional information, if presented in figure 2, would be most useful in evaluating the statement in lines 57 to 60. Gerardo?
Can you listen to me?
No, your microphone was off.
Oh, well, okay, the median income. Can you, I'll have to read that again because I forgot the answer.
Okay. Don't you have it written down?
I do have my test with me.
Okay. Well, I'll just give you one answer of the ones that follows, but this one I'll do it myself. Because I want to get through as much of the test as possible, and we're not going to be able to finish probably anyway. So I'll just go ahead and explain it myself. The right answer for this one is definitely not C or D, because these do not have any relationship to, let me see, productivity is at record levels, innovation, blah, blah. We have falling median income and fewer jobs. We mentioned median income and fewer jobs. We never mentioned the others. So they would not be reliable indicators of whatever we're talking about. From
Answer is A.
Huh?
Answer is A.
Yeah, it's actually not A, it's B. And the reason why is because even though A contains the median income, it does mention that it's only across a single year. And we're measuring it for a long period of time as new technology was implemented. So either median income or number of people would be good, because those two things are mentioned within the 4 lines that we're looking at. But number of people employed in factories from 1960 to 2011 is actually what we're looking for, because it has the right period of time, or the right amount of time to actually measure a change. So answer for 21 is B. Moving on to the third passage, number 22. This one goes to Jeremias. The main purpose of the passage is to.
I click C because in the first paragraph and there is a setup. Can you go because up
Yes,
a little bit?
yes, absolutely.
It says, anyone watching the autumn sky knows that migrating birds fly in a B formation. And here's the key of why I put C, but scientists have long debated why. And then this is like the setup for what their research was about, talking about
exactly.
The migrating birds, why they fly in a B formation.
Yeah, and scientists have long debated why, and then they introduce a new study of ibises, finds that blah, 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 blah. So yeah, that's a pretty good indication that it's talking about a study or explaining research, which is the correct answer. All of these, okay, this is more of an implication of this research, more an implication than an actual explanation. So it's not what the passage is doing. I don't even think we talk about this. This is more of like a possible, practical use of the findings of the research, but we never talk about that. This is a very specific talking point within the passage, but it's not the main purpose. And this is also briefly mentioned, but it's also not the main purpose. So yes, C is the right answer. Thank you, Jeremias. Moving on to number 23, Leah. The author includes the quotation, air gets pretty unpredictable behind a flapping wing, line 17 to 18, to.
The answer is letter A. Explain that the current created by a bird differs from that of an airplane. Because I went to those lines, 17 and 18, and in previous lines, it says, airplanes estimate that they save energy by drafting off each other, but currents created by airplanes are far more stable than the oscillating A's coming off of a bird.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Comparing them.
Yeah, they actually say it in the sentence before. So they include that quotation as a sort of maybe like a sort of example, not really an example, but in support of. Quotations are used a lot, sort of as,
Reinforce the.
yes,
Yeah.
they reinforce it, but they're used as evidence. Even though they're not actual evidence, it's sort of like you have the backing of another scientist or like some news outlet. You mention another person that could give you credibility. That's what quotations do. So they serve as examples. You use both to sort of complement your writing. So anyway, you are correct. And we move on to number 24. So what can reasonably be inferred about the reason Usherwood used northern bald ibises as the subjects of his study? This one goes to Camila.
Okay, teacher, because I have 24 and 25, I want to start by using 25 because it's the
Absolutely.
answer.
Yeah.
So if you go sound really may you go to the line 22, and
Yep.
it says the study published in Nature took advantage of blah blah blah. He pretty much, so that's pretty much the answer of 24, which is D. The where Islex is for Usherwood and his team to track and observe, because it was, I mean, it was something that really existed. Like they just took advantage, like they did it, like they took and tracked it.
Yeah. We never mention any specific reason why ibises are better than other birds. So just off of that, we could know that it's probably they were easily accessible, but we get the indication that they took advantage of already existing research or an already existing project, which really implies that they had no reasoning behind it more than it was just already there. So yeah, exactly right.
It's D and 25C. Thank you, teacher.
Great. Thank you, Camila. Moving on to number 26. This one goes to Gerardo, second chance. What is the most likely reason that the author includes the 30 centimeter measurement in line 30?
That's A.
Yep, exactly. Let's just look at it. It's line 30. I remember when I looked at it, it was easier to understand. First, we're talking about specific numbers here. So we're talking about specially built and all that kind of stuff. They're sort of describing the merit of this study. And then they mentioned that the GPS determined each bird's flight position to within 30 centimeters. So the word within is usually used, that sounds redundant, usually employed to indicate a margin of error, like maybe plus 30 or minus 30. Like the word within is generally used in scientific language to represent accuracy, to represent how good a device or a conclusion is in determining accurate data. So yeah, that's exactly what it's doing. It's saying this device could pinpoint their location up to 30 centimeters or something like that. Oh yeah, that's here. So we never get any indication of this being their flying distance. Again, no mention of a wingspan, and again, no mention of like the actual distance between each ibis and the micro light plane. So yeah, A is the right answer. Thank you, Gerardo. Moving on to number 27 and 28. This one goes to, I'm skipping you, Diego. We're going to Sol.
Well, for 27, I just let out some answers that weren't right.
That's
for
fine.
A, they don't talk about communication, so that's out. They don't mention the same migration routes either. And even though they do talk about expending energy, they don't compare them to ibises. They use the pelicans and storks as an example to create, like to illustrate that they have a similar weight to that of ibises.
Yeah.
So the answer is C.
Okay, and 28?
And in 28, you can see that it's on lines 47 to 48. So it's letter B.
Yeah. So 47 to 48 is particularly interesting because this is actually like negative evidence. It's not the actual evidence to the answer. It's more like what it's not. So smaller birds create more complex wakes. That would make drafting too difficult. So because pelicans, storks, and geese are sort of similarly sized, we can understand that if smaller means different wakes, then similar size means similar wakes. Which is why that is the correct answer. And yeah, they actually imply that they create a similar wake. And they do not say any of the other things, just like Sol said. So moving on to number 29. This one goes to Romina. Romina, are you there? Okay, goes to Catherine.
Okay, so this paragraph is actually talking about scientists like looking out what is going to happen in the future within their research. So I'll say C.
Okay, yeah, let me look at the paragraph again. Scientists do not know, blah, 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 but they suspect, but they may do this alternatively. So this is all hypotheses. If you are able to sort of boil it down to the key ideas in the sentences, like I've told you to do before, you'd see that the verbs sort of indicate possibility. Do not know, they suspect, alternatively, they may do this. And then they talk about future studies. So they're saying, right now, we have these hypotheses, but we do not know. We suspect this, but this might also happen. And then it talks about future studies and what we will do. So that's all pointing strongly towards.
And it also says that they plan to investigate.
Yeah, exactly. So future research will help scientists to better understand, because it talks about our current understanding not being very good, but it says we will do this to better understand the formations. Number 30, this one goes to Andres.
Yes, I think it's D. Suggests that its position in a V formation has the least amount of wind resistance. I think it's because aerodynamic sweet spot, it means that. Like.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. That's totally valid. However, maybe not all of us know what an aerodynamic sweet spot means exactly. So let's just go through the options and see why. So describe how the proper structural design of an airplane helps to save fuel. This is again sort of maybe a possible result of these research studies that are being conducted, but we never actually talk about this proper structural design of airplanes. That's not what we're addressing here. Sweet spot here does not imply exhilaration or fun of any type. We're not talking about that. It's a scientific study. So no. And a sweet spot doesn't really refer to synchrony and movement or anything. I mean, a sweet spot is always a certain position, even if you don't know what aerodynamic is. That already should be a strong clue that suggests C is the right answer. But we also talk about wind resistance, I think. Yeah. They may move around until they find the location with the least resistance. So we address a location with the least resistance. This is sort of another way of saying the same thing. So that is why aerodynamic sweet spot is letter D. And I do want to emphasize that in the SAT, we are not always going to know exactly what they're talking about. you know, we might read passages that have technical terms that we don't know exactly what they're referring to. So we need to learn to understand this in terms of relationships between progression of ideas or between like paragraph topics, and use more of like reading comprehension strategies than just knowing the content. Because of course you might get lucky and get a test in which you get a passage that is based on knowledge that you already have, but you might not. So it's better to know the sort of well, grammatical would more be for writing, but contextual interpretation that we would do in a reading text that we had never seen before, if that makes sense. All right, line 72, ripple most nearly means, this one goes to, I think, Jeremias again. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to clarify that I got it wrong because I put
That's fine.
8. However, I like analyzed it again, and there are talking. Can you go to the line so
Yep.
that I can explain why?
Yep. Line 71. 70.
It says like it says can ripple through the rest of the flock to cause traffic jams, but that's just like it mentions here they plan to investigate how the animals decide who sets the course and the pace, like who is the leader basically, and whether a mistake made by the leader can ripple through the rest of the flock to cause traffic jams. So I think it's the like spread, like
right, and that's the right answer. So I'll explain why. You know what a ripple is?
I didn't know. That's what.
Okay.
Yeah, usually when I see words that I don't know, I try to kind of
Right.
have a definition of it.
A ripple is, for example, when you throw a stone in the water and you see those little waves forming because of the impact. So in abstract language, as it is here, it is used to represent a sort of domino effect of something that happens that affects other things that are close to it and then keeps on rippling, keeps on going to other things. It spreads, basically. But just addressing the other terms, fluctuate means something that is unstable, something that, like in math, you would mean like a wave, something that is very positive, then very negative, then something that is uncertain, something that we don't really, that we can't really predict with accuracy, fluctuates.
I put that one because
yeah,
I thought that was it. Right.
A wave is taking on the literal definition of ripple that I explained, but we should know that we're talking about birds flying in the middle of the air, right? So there will very clearly not be a wave there. And undulate is also referring to wave-like behavior. So all of these are sort of referring to sort of waves. I mean, we could also argue that waves fluctuate and that kind of thing. So no, in this case, it's a more abstract interpretation of the term ripple, which is why B is the correct answer. Before we start with the fourth passage, I want to ask you guys if you want to move on to writing or just keep on with these last two reading passages.
That reading passage is extremely interesting. I really want to do it. Maybe that last one, and then we can go to the reading part, to the writing part, sorry.
Okay. Anyone?
I would say, since we already did 2, why don't we do like writing so it kind of is balanced?
Yeah, maybe we can do this like on Monday or something. Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Okay.
That was just my opinion.
Okay. So I will take up Gerardo and his request because I remember the reason why we decided to do this test was because of this passage that he mentioned. However, I will finish the passage and move on to the writing after. So yeah.
Teacher.
Yeah.
So the one that actually made his request was Catherine Salame. I don't know how to pronounce her surname.
That's okay.
She's not here today, so maybe we should go to Jeremias' opinion, just to, because I really, Catherine really wanted to do this passage, so maybe we should wait for her.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Taking her test.
Right. I don't remember her being the one who asked though. It was definitely a guy. I do remember it was a guy. And I guess I'm confused if it was you, Gerardo, or Jeremias.
Yeah, it was me, but she gave me
They
the
both
idea.
talking about it.
Okay. I'll record the class. We're using this class basically to do this. So I'll record the class, and I mean, it is your class time, so I will do this, and then there will be a video, and there will be you guys to help if she needs it. Okay. And I do think this takes more than a single practice for a class. So, yeah. I did have a little trouble with this for sure. Number 32. I don't remember who was the last one to read it. So I'll just...
Jeremias and
Jeremias. Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
I
So,
want to say that
yeah.
I got it right and then I changed it, but the answer is letter D. I put C at the end, but it's D because the number line 9 says that social changes will raise woman and make her more and more equal of man.
Right.
So you can increase woman.
Right.
In the
It's
sense
not-
we are talking about, we can increase.
Right.
And
Not a mathematical value.
yeah, and we are talking about that. I picture this in my head, like women are here and men are here. So you,
Yeah, like a platform.
yes.
It's exactly elevating. The reason why it's not B or C, because B or C sort of both mean the same thing, cultivate or nurture. They both have more of a connotation of love and care and gradual change, like something happening slowly over time, like a little plant that you water every day and it grows in a long period of time to be bigger. In this case, we're talking about just putting a platform there and elevating women, which is why it's the more appropriate connotation in this case. Number 33. In passage 1, Tocqueville implies that treatment of men and women as identical in nature would have which consequence? This is actually 33 and 34. Camila, you look scared. Just tell me your answer and then I'll explain it if
No,
I feel like I need
okay, so this was so difficult. I believe I took like 4 minutes in each one. I'm sure that like all my soul was absorbed in these two questions. Okay, so the first one, I'm gonna do the same thing that the last time. I'm gonna answer first 34 because if I answer 33, then it's
Okay.
like I really spoil the answer.
That's fine.
Okay, so may you go to line 22 to 24. It says, it may, blah, blah, that by thus attempting to make one sex equal to the other, both are degraded. Now, I didn't know what degraded mean, but just by saying it out loud, it means, I mean, it sounds really ugly, but by the context, I also think it's bad. So for 34, my answer is C, and which is for B in 32 with both sexes.
Yeah.
Will be the term.
I will explain this. You are right. I'll sort of explain what these words mean. These are big words. This is for sure a very hard passage. It's one of the hardest I've seen in a while. Well, I mean, I have not seen many in a while, but anyway, it is hard. So it may readily be conceived. That first part means it will easily be understood or concluded. It may readily be conceived. It may easily be concluded or understood that by thus attempting, that by trying to do this, or that by thus attempting, that by trying to make one sex equal to each other, that by trying to make men and women equal, both are degraded. D is generally meaning down, something bad, you know? And graded, it's like you're in a certain level, certain grade, and you're degraded. If you've ever heard demoted in terms of like a job, demoted means like
Yes, I did.
putting you in a lower position, for example.
Yeah. Okay.
But anyway, you can also think of the equivalent in Spanish, degradar, which is clearly negative. So it's just a lot of big words and it gets confusing. But it's the clear answer, or maybe not clear, but the answer is that both sexes would be greatly harmed, and that is the right piece of evidence to.
Perdón, me olvidé poner ahí.
What?
Ay, perdón, no estaba para oír. Sorry.
Completely fine. Moving on to number 35. This one goes to Gerardo.
35, right?
Yes.
So this one is supremacy. It's the only one that actually makes sense.
Yep.
It could have been ownership, but ownership is more if it had been about race. But in this case, it's about sex. So I think it's.
Yeah. And it's also, I'm going to slightly correct you there because it's not really talking about sex here yet. It is talking about equality more so. But as you say, it's not specifically referring to slavery, which would be the only valid choice for ownership. Territory doesn't really make sense in that context. And omnipotence, we never really argued that humans were omnipotent in this case. So yeah, supremacy is the clear choice. For those of you who do not know what supremacy is or means, it basically, it's the same as the word in Spanish, supremacía, but it's basically one person having a clear sort of being clearly better than the other. That's what it means. Being clearly better or clearly stronger or clearly more important than the other. Okay, moving on to number 36. This one goes to Sol. In passage 2, it's actually 36 and 37. In passage 2, Mill most strongly suggests, oh, this one's the hard one. Mill most strongly suggests that gender roles are resistant to change because they.
Well, two disclaimers. I answered both wrong
Okay.
because since I answered 36 wrong, then 37 was obviously wrong too.
So a question.
And well, I answered 36. It was A, and I understand why it's wrong, but
Okay.
I don't understand why B is the right answer.
Okay.
Because I didn't really see that they were talking about tradition.
Yeah, this one was really hard for me too. I'm just gonna go ahead and explain it the sort of long way because I think this is probably the one that would have given you most trouble of all. Yeah, so Mill is the second passage author. She is clearly against the first passage where she's advocating for a real change in the way we understand gender roles, not only in terms of equality and value of men and women, but also in the roles they perform. And she suggests that gender roles are resistant to change because they, and the right answer is B, and the right answer for 37 is C. And I will explain why, because even I actually did not get this right when I did it myself, but I understand why now because I was sort of going quickly and I missed a few things. So the first thing, A seems like the right answer, has long served as the basis for formal organization of society. And our evidence would be this. As society was constituted until the last few generations, inequality was its very basis. So yeah, the thing is, this part never really addresses men and women directly and never addresses gender roles directly. And we're talking about what she suggested about gender roles. So here she's saying inequality is at the very basis of society. And we have a few indications that this might not be the case because first we have the mention of the word formal, which implies inequality is legislated, and that's kind of not exactly what she's suggesting. And again, she's talking about inequality and not gender roles themselves. She's never really alluding to women being inferior to men in this passage. She's focusing at the passage with a sort of take on self-improvement and the advancement of humanity. Am I making myself clear? I don't think am I? Okay, cool. So she's basically saying in this passage that it is in the benefit or in the best interest for both men and women to embrace this new understanding of gender roles. She's not saying men are going to benefit and women are not, or women are going to benefit and men are not. She's just saying that society itself is unfulfilled. So that is why D is not right, because she's never expressing anger towards the current institutions and groups. In this case, she's expressing that society itself needs change to become better, which is why she never mentioned specific groups in power. That first. And I think at this point you all understand why A is not right, or no?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And C is the one that we can most easily discard because she never really talks about legislative reform, even though it's implied. She never really mentions it. And especially because this is not what she would think, right? I mean, if you are a feminist in this period of time, you are advocating for law changing, right? So you wouldn't say, oh, law just only influences this change indirectly. No, you would actually advocate for how much it matters instead of saying it doesn't matter that much. Now, to justify why B is the right answer, which is even harder than discarding the other ones, the evidence that we point towards is this. And let's see. We mentioned men and women first here. Out of all the relations, that one between men and women is the nearest and most intimate and is connected with the greatest number of strong emotions because it is nearest and most intimate, and there's the most emotions sort of involved in this relationship in this. And I like to see this from the standpoint of, for example, religion, how religion is so embedded in the US Constitution. This religious view of Adam and Eve, of a certain role for women and a certain role for men, a certain understanding of what men are supposed to do and what women are supposed to do. This is deeply entrenched in religion, and religion is deeply entrenched in tradition. This is the first indication that we have of tradition in this case, all these strong emotions as to what men and women are supposed to be and do. This was sure to be the last to throw off the old rule. So it's saying this is sure to be the last relationship that we would change. This the last roles that we would reform. And then she says, 4, in proportion to the strength of a feeling, in proportion to how strongly we feel something should be a certain way, is the tenacity with which it clings to, is the strength with which it is sort of grabbing onto, the forms and circumstances with which it has been accidentally associated. So forms and circumstances define tradition. Tradition is a way of living that is developed through forms and circumstances. And we associate a certain concept with the ways we did that same thing before, or the ways we understood that same thing before, and that is tradition. Tradition is a way of life or a way of understanding something that was developed over time based on circumstances and forms. So it is really hard to understand that we're talking about tradition here. We should use a combination of eliminating the choices that we think are not apt, skipping the question and going back only when we finished the rest and feel like we have time to look at only this. And then once we skipped everything, we can go deep into the passage and try to break down the different things that are happening and the different options. Do you guys understand why this is the correct answer now?
Kind of. I know history is not my thing.
Yeah, it is hard.
I also got both of these questions wrong, but now I see like the word entrenched, and then you have here which it links to the form,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
and then
Forms.
you got in proportion,
Mhm.
and
Yeah, associated also is like, I don't
this
know if it's the actual synonym for entrenched, but like now that you are explaining and giving in-depth details,
Yeah.
explanation, it makes sense.
I think we generally refer to tradition as forms and circumstances. I think that's a very good indication of what tradition is. And we refer to tradition as forms and circumstances that have been developed by, or more like forms that were developed by the circumstances, you know? Circumstances determined the forms or the ways in which we do things by association. That is how I see tradition. Tradition is sort of this rule that we develop that doesn't always make sense. It's just the way things were done before because of the circumstances in which we were. That's how I would define tradition. So in that sense, we sort of see the nod to tradition, but there was a lot here. It is not easy to get to that answer at all, especially in the time that you get. So yeah, I hope that this is a good enough explanation for it, but it's really hard. All right, we can move on to number 38. I will have Catherine do this one.
Okay, so first I want to just say that this took me a lot of time because I didn't see like what was in common with both passages, but then I realized it was like gender and equality, so I chose A.
Yeah, both passages have a very different take on the same topic, for sure. I mean, they're actually in disagreement with a lot of things. But let's go through the options and sort of get at how the answer, how we can arrive at the right answer. Both of the authors are women, and they are both saying that we need change. What they disagree on is just how much of a change do we need and what things we need to change. They both agree on change, and they both agree that change is needed and is good. They just greatly disagree in how much change we need. One of them is like, okay, we need 10% of change, and the other one's like, we need 120% of change. So, but they both agree on change. They never say change will be bad, either of them. So B is wrong. We never talk about economic advantages of gender equality. This is a clear case where your own opinion might get in the way of the right answer, where you might remember that you read something or you believe something about gender equality being better for the economy. That is never mentioned in the two passages. So C is also clearly wrong because it's not based on the writing. It might be one personal conclusion that you hold, but it's not based on the writing. And we also never argue that change is at odds with the principles of American democracy. They both argue for changes in gender roles. However, they disagree on how to implement those changes. They both look towards equality, but they define it in different ways. So this is what they both would have in common, if that makes sense. Yep. Cool.
So one question, do you have more female or male classmates there in the US?
What?
Do you have more female or more male classmates?
Okay, so I'm gonna be honest. I'm in like, every single class is comprised of different people. I'm in classes with over 100 people, and some classes with like 20 people. But even in those classes with 20 people, I don't really count how many men and women there are, because there are just so many classes. Like I've been in, I think, about 12 different classrooms or more, with all of them being comprised of different people. I like rarely have one person that's in more than one class with me. So I would not be able to answer that question by my own classes, but I think that you can definitely look at class population and university websites to see percentages of men and women. I think in general there's more women than men in US colleges, but I'm not sure. So I would encourage you to go to the webpage, and you can go to the University of Notre Dame's website and look at statistics and data like class population to see like divisions by race, by gender, and other things.
Great.
Yep. Awesome. Okay, number 39. Tocqueville in passage 1 would most likely characterize the position taken by Mill in lines 65 to 69 in passage 2 as. Okay, going with I think Romina, or Romina's no longer here, isn't she? Yeah, she's no longer here, I think. So we can go back to Jeremias.
It was wrong my answer for starters because I chose B, and I think the right answer is C. Honestly, at the time when I was doing, I just couldn't think at all. I was like, I thought I was reading, I don't know, something.
Yeah, that's fine. So I'll just go ahead and explain it. It's hard. Yeah, I also had some hard times with this question. This passage in general was not easy at all. Okay, so Tocqueville in the first passage is the one that is against a radical change in gender roles, right? So if she read what Mill says definitely something radical. Let every occupation to be open to all, without favor or discouragement to any, and let blah, 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 blah. So she argues for occupations to be offered by capacity, which makes sense now, but back then it was pretty radical. And to an author like Tocqueville, who is against that kind of free market sort of allocation of jobs, Tocqueville was arguing for women having set roles and men having set roles. She was saying that that was the order that was instituted by nature and the thing that was right. So she would not say A, for sure. She would say it's definitely very radical and not advisable at all. So A is wrong. Persuasive in the abstract, but difficult to implement in practice. If she ever said that it was persuasive in the abstract, it would imply that she's accepting it. And she's not. She's clearly saying that that's not the way things should be. She's saying men have roles and women have roles, and those should be maintained for the best interest of society. So B is not right either. Ill-advised but consistent with a view held by some other advocates of gender equality. This is the right answer. But why? Ill-advised means I would not advise you to do it. I don't think it's the appropriate thing to do. But consistent with a view held by some other advocates of gender equality. She mentions other people having these more radical views that she disagrees with. So she would say, I do not advise this. I do not think this is appropriate, but I understand that there's a lot of people who think this. And again, because she's in disagreement with it, she would not say it's compatible with economic progress. She actually says otherwise. She says this separation of roles is compatible with the best interest of society. So all of these are really things that she would not say except for C. Does that make sense to you all? Cool. Okay, moving on to number 40. Which choice best describes the ways that the two authors conceive of the individual's proper position in society? So these 4 choices are It's one of the cases where they're phrased almost the same. There's just one key difference with each choice. This one talks about sex. This one talks about economic class. This one talks about temperament. And this one talks about benefit to society or most rewarding. So out of those four, only sex and benefit to society are really the valid choices here. B and C are never discussed. But let's look at this one. Tocqueville believes an individual's position should be determined by what is most beneficial to society, while Mill believes it should be determined by what an individual finds most rewarding. We never mentioned most rewarding. Actually, Mill argues for the benefit. I mean, they both argue for the benefit to society. However, they define this benefit to society in different terms. Tocqueville defines a division by sex, and Mill believes in division by abilities. So that is the clear understanding of what this passage is doing. Does that make sense to all of you? Cool. Let's move on to passage 2. Mill would most likely say that the application of the great principle of political economy in lines 38 to 39, passage 1, to gender roles has which effect? And this is the right answer. Because she's arguing that society could greatly benefit from people doing what their abilities will lead them to do instead of what a division by sex would lead them to do. We never talk about this. We never talk about men and women being sympathetic towards one another. This great principle of political economy, if you remember here, 38 to 39, it is talking about dividing the duties of men from those of women. So Mill is the second author. She's not in favor of dividing these duties. So she would definitely not say that this furthers the case of gender equality. She's not agreeing with it at all. And this one is going the entire other way. It's saying that women would take occupations that men are better suited to perform. She also never says this. This is like going the other way. What we're saying is sort of that men are taking all of the occupations and some of them women might be better suited to perform. And here we're saying the opposite. Women take occupations that men are better suited to perform, which is not true. And she would also not say that at all. Does that make sense? Cool, great. So we're done with passage 2, we're done with this troublesome feminism passage. And said we could move on to writing. So, can you guys start discussing the answers on your own? I'm going to go to the bathroom for a second. I don't want you to stop because I do, but I'll be here.
Go to the bathroom too? Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, please go.
Okay.
All of you.
Thank you. I'm going to go.
Okay.
Este fue uno de los más fáciles del writing y uno de los más difíciles del reading.
Ya, yo también pienso eso. El writing fue fue bastante fácil, pero es el tema del que fue de mujeres. Ese fue bastante difícil.
A mí que era por el tiempo también, tipo, cuando yo estaba haciendo eso me quedaba 23 minutos nomás ya y yo, muerte.
Ya, writing estuvo, medio fácil. ¿Ustedes acabaron en tiempo o tipo después continuaron?
No, todo en tiempo en el SAT, menos el Math No Calculator, ese sí me quedé sin tiempo.
Sí.
Wait, había que hacer todo ese practice test, tipo math y eso. Yo hice la
yo
parte
hice
que el
todo
teacher
porque
pidió.
tenía que hacer para
Nomás.
la otra tarea de...
Diversión.
Y divierte con la de hacer practice test. No sé si yo soy el único que encuentra realmente diversión en eso.
Todo lo único.
No me gusta nomás
Felicidades.
quedarse, o sea, me cuesta quedarme concentrado nomás ahí, pero cuando estoy me divierte.
¿Qué almorzaste, Cata?
Genial.
¿Qué almorzaste? Kat.
Yo hice bife con ensalada poroto.
Yo comí
Limpié
bife,
toda
pero
mi
con
cocina, boludo.
sí, a la manteca. Me desperté a las 2:30 de la tarde porque ayer me quedé hasta las 6:30 escribiendo.
Yo no puedo con esto de ser ama de casa, en serio les digo, gente, voy a trabajar hasta pudrirme el cerebro, pero no.
Oye, es mucho trabajo.
Sí.
Muchísimo, ya.
Físico encima, o sea, y no podés ni pensar así, tipo, yo quiero pensar, ¿entendés? Yo quiero así acostarme en mi cama y pensar en el universo, pero no, tengo que repasar el piso.
Acá
Qué
hay alguien
loco.
que no cree en los extraterrestres.
I used to not believe in them, but then you became my classmate. I'm just kidding, Lucas. Te cuento. Te cuento.
Y claro, porque yo soy de otro planeta, barrilete cósmico.
Shut up.
I'll kill myself. Sure. Bueno,
You did not see that coming, Lucas.
El ojito con el labio. Did he just?
finger guns.
Okay, I'm back. Are you all back?
Yeah.
Yeah, ready.
Cool. Okay. We have
So
about
many
20 minutes.
paintings.
What?
Why you have so many paintings? Like I think you have 3 of them. No, only 2.
They're not actually, like, you're talking about my background?
Yeah.
They're not actually paintings. I mean, one of them is, but they're all things that me or my family have done. Like, one is my mom's, and the other ones are like things that we did in school with my brother and sister, actually. Anyway, my mom likes to collect them. Yeah. Anyway, do you want to do this one, or is there a particular passage in writing that you found harder? Because we don't have a lot of time. We probably have time for 1 or at most 2.
I don't know. We can just do them, I believe.
I think you should do the most difficult, but I don't know which one is.
Exactly, that's what I was asking. But if
I think the most difficult was the last one.
okay, since no
To
one
me, it
else.
was the second one, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, the second one I believe was harder.
The second one. Okay. So since 2 people voted for the second one, we'll do the second one. This one's the second one. Okay. So professional development is shared responsibility. Okay. So the first one, number 12. Who's up? Camila. Okay, you. Your turn.
Because I believe that's the only one I did right in the whole section. So let's
Okay.
Okay. So new theories, new practices too, and technologies and blah blah. I
Okay.
believe there is no reason to put new and two. We can just do it like on a list. New theories, practices, and technologies. So I
Yeah.
choose D.
Remember parallel structure, that having like the same sort of each item in a list in the same format, sort of the same word function. So yeah, new theories, practices, and technologies. Theories, practices, technologies.
Yeah.
Same function, same sort of on the same level.
Or category.
Yeah. Number 13. Give that one to, I think, Gerardo. Gerardo, it's your turn. I'm waiting. Okay, moving on to Sol.
Yes. 13, right?
Yes.
It's C.
Perfect. A colon, I'm sorry, a dash makes it sound like the rest of the sentence is sort of out of the line of reasoning, like an explanation or something like that, which it is not. No punctuation is not good either because it just sounds drawn out and like this is a different idea. A sort of explanation it feels, right? It doesn't really go with the main vein of the sentence. It seems like a little bit of an explanation or at least an addition. But it's also not a place for a semicolon because you would be separating this into two sentences and this doesn't really work in this case. So a comma is the right punctuation, especially because we already have a comma here. So it's even clearer that a comma here and then a comma there would be a good punctuation practice.
Teacher, I have a question about it.
Yeah.
I know that we don't use the dash in this case, but well, if we have a dash in like the same and in the middle of the paragraph, and then you have a point and another sentence, you don't need to finish the first sentence with the dash, with the other dash, with another dash at the end.
No, a dash and then a period is completely fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No prob.
And so following that, can I ask a question regarding the dash? In double dashes, you use like you put your double dash, and then you need to finish with the double dash as well, right? Always.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Except when there's a period. When it comes to for a comma, you have to indicate the dash because otherwise you will misunderstand. Like if there's a period, we understand that the sentence finishes and that the idea is over. But if it's a comma, then the sentence and the idea continues. So if your dash thing ends at the comma, then do put another dash. Even though it looks kind of ugly, it really bothers me actually, but I still do it because otherwise you'll misunderstand the meaning of the sentence. All right, moving on to number 14. This one is for Catherine.
Okay, so I just did this in the run, so I wasn't sure, but I put B. Nevertheless.
Okay, this practice of continued education, also known as professional development, benefits not only employees, but also their employers. So it's saying, this is good for both of them. And then it says, it is a shared responsibility. So if it's good for both of them, then it makes sense that it would be a shared responsibility, right? Which means that nevertheless, which indicates contrast, wouldn't really be the right choice here because you would be saying, this is true, however, nevertheless, this is also true, which is not the case here. It's not what we want to do. Regardless also indicates contrast, so it's not the right choice. Similarly, indicates two things that are sort of the same function, with the same value, sort of listing two things, and we're not doing that. This is a conclusion from this, which is why accordingly would be the right choice. It's saying, accordingly is sort of saying, because this is true, it makes sense that this is also true. Or it follows that this is also true. And it's exactly what this is, what is happening here. Because this is true, it follows, or it makes sense that this would also be true. All right, number 15. This one goes to Andres.
Okay, so here I chose C because it says which choice best establishes the argument that follows. So if you read afterwards, then it says, I think the key part here is, then it's the duty of those employees to identify. All right, so if employees find themselves falling behind the workplace discredited content, then it's the duty of these employees to identify. So is their problem to identify?
Right.
So then that what C said must be in charge of their own careers. So yeah.
That's exactly right. Yep. It's the perfect setup for what comes next. B is the exact opposite. So it's clearly wrong. Might consider a popular career path, makes no sense. And will be ready for changes in the job market. Isn't really doing anything that makes sense either. So yeah, the right answer is C. 16. This one goes to Jeremias.
I put A, but that's not correct.
No, it is not. And let me tell you why.
Did I put A? Yes, I put A. Oh, yes, now I'm checking.
If employees find themselves falling behind in the workplace, then it is the duty of those employees to identify and even pay blah, blah, blah. That's the main idea of the sentence. So these critics contend is not part of that main idea. However, this is not another sentence. It's a subordinate clause. So since it is a subordinate clause, it needs to follow in the same sentence. It's an if-then statement. If, then. Whenever you see if, then, it always has to be in the same sentence. If this happens, then that happens. And the way we usually separate it is between commas. So if there is something in the middle that does not partake in the normal structure of the sentence, then we just enclose it between commas. Because it's also not a case to put a dash there. Because that would be like completely taking it out of the sentence's main idea, but this is an appositive, I think, is what we called it, a sort of explanation about the statement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, now it does.
Okay. Okay. Right answer was D then. Number 17, Leah.
I chose letter B, address their deficiencies, because the other ones are too long, and this sentence.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Too long.
I mean,
Just for that.
neither of them is wrong. Not a single one of them is actually wrong. They're just long. And as you remember, you're going for concision, the easiest, shortest way to say something. So B is definitely the best choice in this case. And a clear way to see how these are redundant, show them how and why they are falling behind and what they should do about it. He's using a lot of pronouns. It's being really, really roundabout. It's not really getting to the point. Then C seems to be concise, but flaws and shortcomings refer to the same thing. So that's redundant. Allow them to meet the employer's needs in terms of, this is generally something that should be avoided in concise writing. Does that make sense? Like you can see these things that already point towards this being a matter of concision. The use of pronouns, and then in terms of the knowledge that they are supposed to have. It's kind of just like dando vueltas, you know? Number 18, that one goes to Camila.
Sorry, I was talking, like I was mute. Okay. Okay, so it says the skill of foreign workers get old and worn out. Okay, so I did change it, so A is eliminated, like absolutely. Then it doesn't say that they're not good anymore. It just says they are getting older, and which I also limited B. And even though I'm not like 100% sure what obsolete means, and just by reading the context, I don't think they have lost their charm because they are simply not talking about that. So just like guessing, and because of the context, I think is become obsolete.
Yeah, Do you know the word obsoleto in Spanish?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, it means that it doesn't work anymore. It means that it's not like it's no longer appropriate to do the task that it's supposed to. So in all honesty, B would not be wrong. However, B is not wrong in terms of meaning. However, it is wrong in terms of other things. First, become obsolete is more concise. It's shorter. Same with get old and worn out. D is definitely wrong because nobody's talking about charm here.
Yeah.
But A and B are not really. I mean, I guess A is also wrong because it has like a more narrative feeling, and this is like a very objective article. So either this or that. And are no good anymore is sort of informal language again. Whereas become obsolete is clearly the language that we would choose if we were writing a scientific article or a descriptive piece. This is like a little emotional and a little amateur. Like it sounds like more of a kid wrote it, to be honest, than the other one. These are small words, and this is the SAT. So if you see unusually small words, then it's probably wrong. It probably has something to do with it. And finally, the word obsolete, if you know what it means, it is very precisely used for work, like in terms of work skills. So it is like not only more concise, it's also clearly meant to be in a context like this, whereas no good anymore can be applied to many, many, many things.
Okay. I just want to get clear this part. You said like little words, informal sentences, and it's better for us to like kind of not ignore them absolutely, but try to find out like a best.
Yeah, that is because one of the points of this exam is to measure your vocabulary. You have SAT words on purpose. Like you're supposed to know what these complicated words are supposed to mean. So if they could phrase this in a more complicated way, they will. Because you're supposed to know these complicated words. They're not going to make it easy on you. So words like good, like very, like really, you usually won't see them. Words that are very, very simple and general, they will usually go for precise choices.
And teacher, correct me if I'm wrong. Lose your charm also is a colloquial of, I'll say it more phrase than word, because lose your charm. It's
Absolutely.
more used like in normal conversations than this formal writing, so to speak.
Yeah. We could see them in formal context, but generally when we're referring to nostalgia or the good old days, like we will see words like charm in normal conversation or in narrative style writing. Yeah, the word charm doesn't have any place in an objective recollection of something or a description. So yeah. Moving on to these last three exercises. I think that's the last we'll do today. 19 goes to Gerardo, if you're here. If not, are you here?
Hello.
Okay,
19.
good. You're back.
The most professional development provided to employee include, B.
Yep, that's just a question of person. Most common forms is plural, which means the right verb does not include an S. It's just include. Okay, then number 20, that's pretty simple, so I don't think I have to like go over all the choices. Number 20 goes to Sol.
It's P. Delete the underlined portion and begin the sentence with a capital letter.
Yep, exactly. None of the transition words clearly illustrate the relationship that they should. because there really isn't much of one. I guess you could find one, but none of these choices really does that. Besides that would include like if you're giving a reason for something or you're stating a fact, then you would have to state a similar fact to be able to use besides that. Nevertheless indicates contrast, and around the same time indicates chronology, like a timeline, and that's not really what's happening here. So, yep, D is the right choice. And lastly, let's look at 21, and that's going to be Catherine.
Okay, so I think B summarizes best what the graph is showing. Like it begins with the foundation and it goes up to professional networks.
Okay, so I think you got a little confused here. It's actually the opposite, and I'll explain why. So what we're saying here is, first we talk about the overarching framework. I don't know if I've used this word before with you, overarching. It's like an arch is un arco, and it's like overarching. So it's like the background, like the overarching framework means like the big context, the big picture. And within which means inside of it. So within which staff receive coaching. So coaching is inside of something, and then as well as the opportunity to belong to something that's smaller again, smaller circle, a professional network, which is wrong because we can see that the biggest circle is professional network. So let's understand this in terms of like what it actually is. A professional network, una red profesional, right? It's a big thing, like people around the world and that kind of thing. Within that network, you might get people that give you coaching and consultation. So they give you some personalized attention, right? And within that coaching program where you're receiving some personalized attention, you might get the opportunity to get inside workshops that are specific time periods where you get like capacitación is what we're going at in Spanish. So it's all an order of hierarchy. So a network, a big network where you get some personalized attention, and within that personalized attention, you might get the opportunity to attend these designated periods of time to help develop your skills. Does that make sense? But you really didn't have to understand the, sorry.
Sorry, I was just trying to say I was confused by the terms, yeah.
Well, that's okay. That's completely fine. What I'm going to say, though, is that you didn't need to understand the terms to get this right, because you're actually interpreting the graph. And you're looking at the circles, bigger circles, smaller circles. So as long as you know these words, like framework, overarching, then within, and belong to, that kind of thing, those should indicate the relationships between the concepts, and you can relate that to circles, right? Big circle is the overarching framework. Within that big circle, inside of that big circle, we have a smaller circle, which is coaching and consultation, and something that belongs to that circle is the foundation skill building workshops. Does that all make sense to all of you?
Yep.
Yeah?
Sí, señor.
Cool.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're about done. Or no, we're actually done. What do you guys think of this? Was this something that you'd like to do again?
Yes.
Yeah?
Definitely.
Totally.
Teacher, I'm sorry for being a party pooper, but are you missing one question though?
It's
Am I? Oh, oops. Haha. Okay, I'll just go quickly. Employers can also identify which employees have successfully. Okay, so this is clearly not using any punctuation. You can identify which employees have successfully completed blah, 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 blah. It's, there's no comma there because employers can also is not saying anything, or it can also identify is not saying anything. So this is just like the sentence predicate, right? Remember the predicate, like the verb and the objects and stuff? So you're basically breaking apart the predicate if you put punctuation here, and you're not supposed to do that unless there's like a colon or something. Sorry, a dash or something. But that's not what we're doing here. So yeah, no punctuation. And with that, we can call this session off. Hope you all enjoyed it. And I'll see you again on Monday.
Are we going to continue the ones that we didn't did?
The ones that we didn't do. We can do that. I'll think about it. This is the question for you guys. Do you want to already move on to understanding the SAT essay on Monday, or do you still want to do more practices on the test that you've already done?
Okay, that's a tough question.
I actually want to stay in this part.
You want to?
Practice more.
Yeah, I would
Yes,
go for practice.
since the essay is optional, so.
I agree. So, yep, we can keep doing this.
Teacher, I don't know if I didn't got it, but can you send us your PowerPoints?
No, I did not send them.
Please.
Yep. Okay. Yep, I will send them to you, and I will actually do it right now so I don't forget it again.
Okay, never mind.
Okay. Well, thank you all for being in today's class. I hope you enjoyed it. And next time, remember I haven't been asking for a lot of homework from you lately. So next time, if I do say that you have to do something, please do it.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You don't have to apologize. Just do it next time.
Okay, will do.
Okay.
I promise.
Bye, guys. Have a good weekend.
Bye, teacher. Thank you so much.
Bye. Have a good weekend too.
On Monday.
Have a good weekend too. See you, teacher.
Bye-bye.